Your event is starting and your event is live. Hi everyone, Angela Fair here. Ready to get started on another live watercolor painting lesson. Today you're going to paint along with me or just watch and enjoy the process as I paint some signs of spring, beautiful pussy willows. And that's a little glimpse of what you see on my work surface, which we'll be going to in just a moment. In the meantime, before we do that, hi, I just want to say hello to all of you who have taken the time out of your day to join me. I know that it's different time zones all over the world. For some of you, it's late at night, hi Gunhild in Norway. And for others, it seems to me Australia, first thing in the morning for you over there. We have Panama represented. All over the United States from the east, New Hampshire, Michigan, that seems east to me, South Carolina, and then over to Texas. And usually I see California, Mississippi's here, New Mexico, beautiful place. Actually, every time I name a place, I just want to come and visit you there and we can paint together. So just too many places to see and people to paint with. So I'm so glad that we can get together and paint live here in my studio in northern British Columbia. It really is spring here. I was out for a run this morning with my dog Ari and the geese were out, the ducks, and the spring runoff. We have had so much snow. We literally had 7 months of snow and freezing temperatures. And so the melting is happening and there's just water running everywhere. And we also had our first bear sighting this spring. A neighbor phoned us up last night and said their dog had scared away a bear just down the road from us. So I guess I could have felt nervous when I went for my run today, but I tend to, well, for one thing, I was running away from the forest where the bear would have hidden, so I didn't feel too worried about it. And of course, having my dog along helps too. We are going to start painting. I want to talk as we paint some tips to encourage you because I know painting from life, and even though it's just a branch, can be intimidating. And pussy willows have some very unique characteristics. So we're going to go to that. I also promised that we would finish our daffodils that we started last week. So I'm going to do both of those things. We have a lot of stuff to do. So we're going to switch right over to my work surface and go there. While we do that, I'm just going to pop up a temporary screen so I can get my microphone adjusted and make sure my camera's in the right place. And I think we'll do the daffodil first. Watercolor Mastery, that's the advertisement you see on the screen while I switch the camera. That course is actually going right now. We are in week 2 of Watercolor Mastery, and those of you who are in the course, feel free to say hello if you're watching live. And you're really getting a double dose of watercolor over the next few weeks. The course is very active. We have been studying value this week and using value to make our paintings stronger. And it's amazing to see what everyone is creating. Okay, so we're going to take a look at our daffodils. And I have a bit of a problem because the daffodils I was painting last week no longer look like the daffodils I have. So they've dried up a little bit. So that means I get to work from my impressions. And I guess that would be where the term impressionism came from. And with impressionism, we're really just working on getting a sense of the object or the mood or the place that we're painting. We want to create an experience really for the viewer rather than capturing a moment. I just read that on an artist quote, and I'll have to share it on my Facebook page later, talking about photography being about capturing moments and art being about creating them. And I have to ponder that. I'm not sure if I completely understand that concept, but I kind of like the thought of it. So I'll be thinking about that more in the next few days. With our daffodils here, because I just want to capture the feeling of them, I want to work with what's already working in the painting. So I have some elements that I really like. I love the color scheme that I've chosen. We worked with our lemon yellow and our permanent yellow deep. These were Shinhan Professional watercolors. And we worked with a cobalt teal from Core, which is my favorite turquoise color. And I'm actually not 100% sure if this is the one I painted in the live video because I have about 6 daffodil in progress paintings that I've started, and they're in various stages of creation. And so I get to, when I look at something like this as soft, fluid first layer, I have to think about I have two choices basically. I can paint around the shapes that I've created, make them pop by using negative painting, or I could choose to paint the shapes themselves. So build on what's already happening on the paper. And I might have to do a combination of both. Most of the time you never use, very rarely do you use negative or positive painting in a vacuum. They work alongside of each other. So for this, I really like my soft and light background. I don't really want to darken it at this point. So I'm going to start by painting in a positive way. So painting the shapes, refining the shapes that I've already started to establish. So I'm using both my yellows. I think I used a little bit of Aussie Red Gold in this as well. And I'm just going to start seeing if I can pick out some petals. And I'm going to surprise you here in just a second. I'll explain why. So maybe I'm painting a curve of a petal right here. And where'd my Aussie Red Gold go? It's in this temporary palette over here. So I'm going to surprise you because I'm going to actually, I'm positive painting one petal right here, this triangular shape, but I'm also negative painting around that little bugle of my daffodil. So I'm using my Aussie Red Gold to try to capture that shape. And it's actually negative painted on this side and positive on this side. So that's what I mean when I say that really negative and positive painting, they don't happen alone. They work together. And as I move down towards the petals, all my palettes are in a different place than I expect them to be today. So I have to look. I'm going to grab some of that cobalt teal and just join that new petal to the stem that I already painted. And by doing that, I create a seamless look where I've softened this yellow edge and flowed it down to the cobalt teal. That was my stem. And by doing that, and I know that's probably a little bendier than a daffodil stem would actually be, I like the whimsical feel of it, so I'm totally going to go with it. And then I'm going to try to be very suggested. I faded that stem away so that I'm not locked into creating a crisp shape at this point. I can decide to add that later, or I can keep it soft and simple. And I really try to err on the side of being simplistic in my painting. That really lets the watercolor glow. And my withered up daffodils that are kind of off the camera here, they're kind of inspiring me a little bit because some of the edges and shapes that they're created are just really interesting and fascinating. So suddenly my daffodil is kind of curling a little bit more than maybe it would in reality if it were perfectly fresh. But I like that, so I'm going to let it be. And we'll add a little petal tip right there. Suddenly now I have too crisp of a shape. I've got petal, 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 and each one has a very crisply defined line. That's more than I want to see happen in my painting. So then I'm going to take some water and give that water a chance to flow and soften those edges. And I'm going to probably over soften. And that's why we paint in multiple layers in watercolor. We try something, we might erase it by bleeding it out like this, and then we can choose to come back later and refine again. And because this one's kind of off to the side, and I like starting, if I'm starting a painting, I like, or coming back to a painting after some time has passed, I like kind of pulling off to the side, and I'm gonna add a little dark in here and see if that makes my flower pop. That's a red violet, the Shinhan Professional Red Violet, which is an amazing color. I could do an entire video lesson about it because it's pretty fun. And it makes a really good darker value when you're working with yellow. So yeah, I'm not sure about that. We're gonna move over to this one. And again, just working to, the goal here being to refine the shape without adding too much detail. And I still feel like I'm gonna just add a little bit of misting to that because I felt like there were too many crisp shapes even in the center of my daffodil. So a little back and forth with the paint. And I think part of the reason that this isn't going the way I want it to is because I spent a lot of time today thinking about my pussy willows. And so I want to paint those. My brain is on those instead of on my daffodils here. Now I want to show you something, and I'm going to try to bring this closer to the camera so you can see it. There's a little shape right here that was caused by dry brush. And it was there in the first layer of the painting. And I really like it. It gives me a petal without me needing to add anything else. So I'm just going to soften away. I am going to connect it to the flower with a little bit of a soft brush stroke right there. And that's just created that petal just a little bit simplified. And I think that's almost perfect. Now it's just getting the rest of the petals to go quite so smoothly. While we're painting, I just want to comment that really all of watercolor is experimentation. And if your painting's not turning out, please don't consider it a failure. And I go back and forth to this all the time. I'm always talking about this idea that my painting failed. When you're thinking that, oh, this painting was a total failure, you're failing to recognize the value of your you're not recognizing the value of the decisions you've made during the painting process. A painting is a collection of decisions. It's not just one single experience. It's multiple experiences. It's multiple sessions often, and it's many, many decisions. And I'm just going back and forth and adding detail and then lightening with my paper towel. And I'm liking the shape of that. I'm actually going to stop that one right there because it has a little bit of the trumpet shape that I'm looking for and doesn't need anything else. So if we have this painting that's a collection of decisions, some of those decisions are going to be really good. But the problem is that sometimes they get overshadowed by the decisions that didn't work out. So we try things and we experiment and we take risks. And when we take risks, we learn a lot. But we don't always succeed. And that does not mean that your painting may be an undesirable outcome. You're not happy because your painting didn't turn out. But we have to remember that there were many decisions that went into that painting that were good ones that you're going to use to make your next painting better. And so just because we don't like the outcome of one of our painting, doesn't mean that you've wasted your time or wasted your paper. There's so much that goes into that. I really like that brush stroke right there. That's the Aussie Red Gold and the Cobalt Teal, making beautiful magic together. So I just want to encourage you with that. It's in another thing to compare it to would be maybe to a marathon. If you want to learn to run a marathon, you are not going to go and run 26 miles on your first outing, especially if you've never run before. You gradually build up your endurance. You have some days where you're slow and sluggish, other days where things progress quite well. Sometimes it might feel like you have a setback here and there. And a really good example would be, if you have to slow down your running so that you can work on building up your endurance, or you want to do some heart rate training, and that involves often being very slow. Maybe your form is bad, and so you have to retrain just to improve your running form. And all of those things doesn't mean you failed as a runner. It means that you're growing and strengthening your abilities and your skills. And with the goal of running a better marathon down the road, and I really think that we should take that perspective about our painting as well. Just what feels like a setback doesn't mean we've failed or that we shouldn't keep trying and working toward that goal that we've set. And I'm going to stop lecturing you now. And I think I'm going to pull back from this too, because I'm starting to add a lot of crisp lines, and I really want to take time to evaluate what's happening in the painting. Okay, there's a few things that I've done that I've liked, and there's a few things that this painting could still need. And this is the kind of thing that takes time and fussing. I really like how this daffodil's going, actually. It doesn't need a lot more. It has this beautiful bend in the stem where the stem meets the flower. I love the way it's kind of looking out of the painting. I know it doesn't have eyes, but it's looking anyhow. And I like the little hints of petals here and there. Actually, I could probably try adding a little hint of a petal just with that similar little V shape. As long as I get the color right, just off to the side there. See if that works. Another experiment. And lighten. Left something dirty there. Okay. This one I'm not crazy about, so I'll be brainstorming ways to make it better. This could still become a flower, and in fact, maybe I just decide to get in a slight addition to the shape. If it's pointing away from me, I might see some curving petals there. You can see I painted like a big, scoot over a little bit, painted like a big yellow blob, really, and then soften and blend a little bit. Gives me that. This has gotten very dirty. Almost out of my Aussie Red Gold. I'm going to have to choose which palette I'm going to put it into, and that's a harder job than you might think. They're all my favorite palettes, so where I put my favorite colors gets very difficult. And by softening and blurring things, we let people know that they don't have to spend too much time focused on that area. We need to remember that if we're putting details in the non-focal areas of our painting, it really commands the eye and moves the viewer into the painting. Okay, like I said, I'm not really focused on daffodils today. I apologize for that, but I've done a little bit of playing with them. And so that makes me happy. It makes me think about daffodils. And this could spur me to, if I were alone in my studio, playing with an early wash, adding a little bit of detail, could spur me to filling up 5 more daffodil beginnings. The more I do, the more expressive, I guess, I get with how I paint them. And that's really fun to see that develop. And I'm going to do the same with my pussy willows. So this is not the most beautiful branch of pussy willows that I've ever seen. We have different kinds of willow trees here. And so some of them have really long, graceful wands. Some of them are little stubby spikes like this one. And I think by not having a perfect pussy willow here in my studio, that gives me a little bit of freedom to be interpretive. We'll just take those apart and use those little guys so it doesn't take up my whole space. So I've worked on about 3 different ways of painting pussy willows, and I think I think I'm going to show you all of them. I think we have time, so I'm excited about that. There's so many ways to paint anything, and let me just grab some paper here. So because there's always a lot of different ways to paint something, and whenever somebody asks me how they should paint something, my answer is always, it depends. And it really does. So what I think we'll do is we'll start with maybe the first place most of us would go, and that is just trying to get some branches down. First of all, I'm going to use the colors I told everyone I was going to use in the description below the video. And all the supplies I'm using today are linked up in the description, so make sure you check that down below. And I kind of wish this was a smaller piece of paper. Turn it sideways and just use half of it. So I might start by painting a branch. And this is the Hematite Burnt Scarlet. And we're just going to throw a little willow branch down here. That's kind of nice. And then, let me just pull my reference back in front of me here so I know what I'm doing. And then I'm actually going to paint my background next. And that can feel a little bit backwards, but having this shape here to guide me is going to help me to know where my pussy willows are going to go, so I can leave those areas white. And for my background, I'm going to use, let's see here, Cobalt Violet Deep, which is a beautiful granular color, and it's quite cool and gray, because it's a little bit muddy, I think. And it mixes really nicely with the hematite, which is a beautifully granulating brown. And so we get the colors of early spring. And I'm actually going to paint right up beside my branch that I've already painted and leave those spaces for my pussy willows, which is going to give me quite a crisp shape where the pussy willows come out. Let's see, maybe one over here. And I'm going to give myself a little more space than I might need. So I'll just darken that up so you can see it. So there's one there and one there. We'll put another one over here. Another one over here. And we'll add some more hematite. It's such a fun color. Throw some over there. And the hematite goes on like a brown, like a rich brown, as you can see. But then as it soaks into the paper, it starts to separate, and there's like gray particles and kind of a rusty undertone maybe. So you actually get the effect of several colors when you're working with cobalt violet and hematite burnt scarlet. And these are colors from Daniel Smith. I don't know if I mentioned that already. They are linked up in the description below the video because I'm always getting asked about my supplies. Okay, so now I have a background and I have a single branch. And as I've painted, my branch has gotten a little bit blurred. And and there's a great discussion on, I keep looking over at the chat, and there's a great discussion on abstract versus expressive, and I'd love to weigh in, but maybe we'll save that for a little bit later, towards the end when I start answering your questions. I definitely work in a loose and suggestive manner, talking about capturing emotion and feeling, and painting in a way that kind of makes my heart very happy. And I really haven't painted very many pussy willows here, just to save a little bit of time. So as I've painted, my background has softened my branch so it's not a strong dominant line. It's a broken line. And I like to think of it as a hide and seek line where it's here and there and it's a little bit soft and loose. And so that little bit of a line, even though it's broken in places, guides the eye up towards our pussy willows, which now that we have these shapes here, they don't look very soft. And so I was fiddling around with different ideas to try to make my pussy willows look soft. And I stumbled upon my neutral tint from Sennelier. So I'm going to throw a little bit of that in. And what I found with neutral tint, this particular brand anyhow, and I'm using it to paint the little seed, the little hull that is attached to the pussy willow right there. If you can see that, they're quite dark. So I'm using the neutral tint to place that. And it is a really, this particular neutral tint is a color that really spreads into a wet wash. So by adding it in right now, it whooshes out into my wet background and starts to create this look of softness. And I think it's really funny that here I have softness with my branch and my little seed hull, and yet it's helping enhance that feeling of softness with my pussy willows, even though it's not actually the fuzz of the pussy willows themselves. I don't know if you're capturing that feeling, but I sure feel it, and it makes me very happy. That also means that I can take that neutral tint, and I'm actually going to just take a little bit from the edge of the palette where it kind of oozes up over the palette and try to water it down a little bit so it's more of a gray. And if I touch that in here, it should whoosh out and give me a little bit of a gray as well. My pussy willows are actually darker. Actually, I am seeing that they're darker towards the center of the pussy willow as well. The edges are quite light, but we have some darkness there. So let's try and see if we can do that. So a little dab of neutral tint right in the middle of the pussy willow, willow bud. And then I'm going to add some water. And the neutral tint will chase that water. So the more water I add, the more it will start to ooze out. And so now I can try softening. And the first thing that happens is I lose my edge where my where that hard edge where I had originally positioned my pussy willow. But it's a good time to lose it because now I know what I want to do. I want to have that softness happen. And so they're going to start to flow out and create that fuzzy edge. Then in a little while, once it's dried or almost dried, I can go in with my original background color. I'm going to try doing it right now and paint around that edge that I lost. And if I do it right now before it's dry, and that's a mix of hematite and cobalt violet together, it gives this lovely burgundy color. But if I add that addition, darken up the background while my neutral tint is still wanting to flow, should give me a really nice contrast that I can work from. So that's one way to do it. And I can keep, and I could add some more background over here. Excuse me while I sneeze. And make my stem pop as well. So yeah, I'm starting to see them, and I mean, I've done this very quickly. I would probably take a little more time in positioning where my pussy willows would go, but I like this method, using the neutral tint to push out that fuzzy edge and then darkening up around it with some negative painting while the color is wet, and you can keep some softness. But I learned something else about neutral tint, which was really fun to work with. So I'm going to do that in a second version. I'm just going to use the other half of the paper here. And so this time, excuse me for a sec, this time I'm going to start with neutral tint and a big juicy brush. Look how dark that is. Now neutral tint, I believe, is ordinarily used to darken a color, and I don't ever use it for that really, because I like to darken my colors often by adding a complementary color to them, and that way I get a muted version. And the neutral tint's just a little bit too much like black for me most of the time, although it's got a bit of a purpley cast. But I really had fun just working with its characteristic of that flowing movement. And you can see it would make wonderful cat fur. We have the world's fuzziest cat, and she really needs a good grooming before spring here. And so now I've covered my whole background with the neutral tint. And I'm going to now use some paper towel to find my pussy willows by lifting. So, and this might work better if I waited just long enough for the paint to kind of settle in, because as you can see, I blot with my paper towel and immediately that color neutral tint wants to flow back in. But I get to have a beautiful soft shape by blotting. So I'm creating my pussy willows by lifting out, which is kind of a form of negative painting. And I'm going to create my stem that way as well. Just the suggestion of it. And again, so it's lifting, but it's blending as well. And that gives me some real softness. It gives me a beautiful, rich, dark background. And then in here where I've lifted, I'm trying to keep my paper towel kind of rounded in shape. And here where I've lifted, I can then refine my shape and create my pussy willows. And then now that I've kind of lifted out where I want things to go, I might decide to work with some colors. Let's see here. Like my hematite's gonna bleed and separate like we talked about. But I can add it into my neutral tint. This is just an alternate method. It might not be your favorite, and that's okay. I like trying and exploring different ideas to see what's going to work the best. Whenever you're blotting, I don't know if these aren't the prettiest blots I've ever made, and so then I want to go back and adjust them with my brush. So I can go in with my cobalt violet and start to add some beautiful complexity to my neutral tint. Watercolor being transparent, I get to layer color, and you can do that while the color is drying, which will give you some soft fluid effects, or you can wait till it's completely dry and you'll have a little more control. And I can also take, it's almost dry here, I'm going to grab some sepia, which is a really dark brown, and I'm going to see if I can just position a stem here. And you know, previously I used hematite and the neutral tint. Sepia doesn't move a lot into a wet wash, so it's a good choice for creating a stem right now because it won't bleed too much into that wet wash, and yet it'll help me find my shapes for when I want to add those details later. So now these fuzzy shapes are really starting to create a very interesting edge. It reminds me of like those some other fuzzy plant. I'm trying to remember what the name of it is. A little more in the late summer, but I could have a lot of fun with finding those pussy willow shapes and painting around them. Let me just try a little bit more. So over here I have one. I think the stem would be coming this way. Maybe I'll just paint around it a bit. And I think with painting a fuzzy object, you really need to be a little bit courageous with your fluidity, with creating those loose and wet edges. Look at how the neutral tint, and that's another way to do it. We were lifting out, but you could also use just a drop of water on your brush to start creating some pussy willows. And that one's getting away on me. The other thing I wanted to show you, so much I want to show you today, is if you have a dark wash like this, you could try using some white gouache to create your white pussy willow shape. I'm just going to use a little gouache, and you can see it kind of incorporates itself. It's an opaque watercolor, so it incorporates itself into the painting, and it really does create that fuzzy edge. So we've got different options. Composition-wise, this is not my favorite painting that I've ever done, and probably if I wanted to develop one of these two, I would probably be working more on this one. I have one more thing I want to show you, and that's this one here that I did before we started this morning, just as my warm-up. And so this is the wet and wet version where I use the cobalt violet and the hematite burnt scarlet, and dotted in that neutral tint here to create this fuzzy pussy willow. I really only created one that I love, but I thought, while you're here with me, let's develop it a little bit further so you can see where I might go next with this. Couple of things. We're going to focus on this area, and so a couple things that I think it needs. I want to refine the shape just a little bit more, and so we're going to be talking about edges as I do that, and we'll get that stem positioned the way we like. We also might work on this little edge here showing up. It's a watermark that's moved in from the edge of the paper, and that generally happens when you have a lot of water that moves to the edge of your painting and you don't do anything to remove it. Most of the time when I'm painting, if I get a bead of water along the edge of my painting, I blot it up with my paper towel, because it will want to run back onto your paper and create that edge, that bloom. So that's something we're going to want to diminish a little bit. And oh my goodness, look at how that's bleeding, like, or blotting and creating amazing blooms. So neutral tint blooms really well. That's a subject for an entire different video. We're not going to go there today. So I'm going to go in with my neutral tint, and you can see it's looking very crisp right now. And I'm just defining around my pussy willow, but giving it quite a large amount of space too. And I'm going to quickly pull that color out, adding water way further than you might think you need to. And then along the side of I'm going to paint right up beside my branch, but keep the branch itself dry. And now that I've let the neutral tint move out away from the pussy willow, I'm going to add a little water here to soften that edge I just laid down. So both sides are going to be soft. And I'm just worrying it with my brush a little bit. Creating some texture. I'm actually seeing a little pussy willow right here and another one right over there. So I'm going to try to encourage them to emerge while you're watching here. Coax them out of hiding. I also want to hide that edge that's happening there. So now that I've moistened everything, I can add more background, more color to my background if I want to. And I think that kind of works. I can also suggest distant shapes as well with softness and a little bit of color. A little hematite there. So yeah, they're kind of just emerging there gently. And again, maybe blotting, seeing if that helps a little bit. On this side, we're going to find a shape there as well. We're just keeping it slow. So I will mention here, as we're starting to wind down the painting portion of today's lesson, that this will be our last watercolor live lesson for the time being. I really want to work on a new project that I've been thinking about for a while, and I just need to make the time to do so. I'm excited about it. I'd love to tell you more, but it's just too early to say. But I think that it will be something new that will serve my YouTube audience just even better than I am now with these live lessons. I want to be always more efficient in sharing information, and also make it so that I do have a private life and I'm not spending all my time managing emails and working on video projects. So we'll see how that goes over the next month or two. And I appreciate so much your emails and letters of support and encouragement for everything, for all my ventures. You've always been so gracious in receiving them. So thank you. Okay, so as I've been babbling, I added a little more neutral tint to try to create those little hulls around the pussy willow. And I'm not sure it's working, so then I get to lose courage and blot it up. And that just softens it so that if it isn't working, it's not nearly so dominant. And pulling up along my stem there. They're starting to emerge. I'm really trying to be timid here, a little bit hesitant, because I don't want to lose the softness of my pussy willows. So I'm trying to build up my darks while keeping those soft edges. It's a little bit of a challenge, but I'm liking the softness that's happening here, and getting to know the way watercolor moves in a wash. And the different colors have different amounts of responsiveness to water. And that's a really good thing to learn. Using a color like neutral tint can be terrifying when you place it on that wet wash and it just whooshes out. And so knowing that you can use those characteristics to your advantage to make a painting more interesting and exciting, that's a good thing to know. Knowing that it lifts really easily so that you can create blooms or lift out and blot. That's another useful thing to know. I'm going to move over to your questions and comments, and so we'll just set all that aside here. I was going to show you my Cobalt Violet Deep, my Hematite Burnt Scarlet Genuine, and my Sennelier Neutral Tint. All of these three colors were the primary colors that I used today. Okay, just switching over to take a look at your comments, and yeah, get your questions now. So here we go. Change to my correct camera. There we go. Okay. I really want to encourage you to take the time to experiment. If you're always working on serious paintings and never just playing and exploring and pushing your boundaries, your growth is going to happen much more slowly and almost accidentally. So I think that when we experiment and push ourselves to try different things and different ways of interpreting a subject, we move our growth along just that much faster. And so it may feel like you're coming out with a lot of failed paintings, but the decision-making process that comes out of those is really invaluable. Okay, Joe, go ahead and give me any questions that are popping up. hearing comments just regarding pussy willows, and they're not as common for many of you as they might be for me here. And of course, I lived in a tropical country in Papua New Guinea. We didn't have pussy willows there either. So you have other signs of spring or other paintings or other objects that would need this same kind of soft technique and approach. The colors that I've used today too, I want to encourage you, they're not, you know, the hard and fast rule of what you should use for these paintings. Use what you have. I like showing you some of the colors in my palette because it gives you the opportunity to kind of virtually try them out or see how they act without having to buy them yourself. And so you get to know whether or not it's something that you would like. There are many websites, handprint.com is one of them, that talks about the technical side of watercolor paint. I just like to play and use it, so I don't have a lot of technical insight on these colors. I just know how they work when I'm painting. Regarding neutral tint, there's a lot of discussion on the qualities of neutral tint. It's a new color for me. It's not, I'm trying to think. I don't know that it will be in my palette, like my travel palette with all the colors that I love the most, but I really have been enjoying just that ability to throw on that really daring dark color, which sometimes you just need to throw down a big scary dark. Okay, Wayne, Joe's got a few questions for me to answer here. Wayne asks, relating primarily to the daffodils or other green foliage for tips on creating higher contrast shadows. Wayne, I like using a violet and especially a blue violet when I'm working with yellows, if I want those strong, rich shadows. Sennelier makes their beautiful cinereous blue, which is nice. Manganese blue is another good choice that I really enjoy. And then mixing into that a beautiful violet, dioxazine violet. Manganese violet works really well as well. Kathy and others who are asking, I know this is going to be my last live lesson for a while. I will not be disappearing from YouTube. That is pretty much the opposite of what I want to do. But I just want to change my format up a little bit so I can present information and share my watercolor journey and encourage you just a little bit more efficiently. And while I learn how to do that and start to set it up, I just need a little bit of extra time. So I appreciate your comments and that you're going to miss me because I do really enjoy these live sessions and working with you. I do have, if you enjoy working with me, and this is as in person as you're able to get, I do have all of the lessons that I've done to date in my lesson library. Links are in the description below the video. And I will be teaching in Edmonton, Canada in June. There's one space left. And in Ireland for my 6-day travel workshop, and I'm sure you're tired of hearing that I'm going to Ireland. I just really want you to be able to come with me. So if you want to grab one of the few spaces that are left for my trip to Ireland, there are links for that as well below. September 2018. Just thank you everyone for your support. I want to encourage you again, keep painting. Just paint in a way that, pay attention to the little moments when you're painting that make your heart sing. Those are what have motivated me to become my own favorite artist. It's a really cool thing to have in your life, this feeling of joy in what you're creating. And if you're just beginning to paint, it does take time to kind of get the brush mileage and master the technical skills. But as you do that, you're going to see those little heart-singing moments come out more and more. Have faith in the journey and know that you can do it. I appreciate everyone being here with me today. I'm going to wrap this up because I feel a little bit actually, I just want to go outside. It's such a beautiful spring day. We finally have some warm weather, and I'm probably going to do a little more painting too. I've got now the things I've done today are a little bit unfinished, so I'm going to keep an eye on them, start to see what emerges from those little paintings, those little studies, and they're going to inspire me to paint more spring-themed stuff, and that's pretty pretty exciting to see happen. Oh, Nancy has a comment, and I just can't leave without replying to it. Sorry, I was just threatening to leave, apparently. Nancy, your comment is, in your email, you talked about identifying yourself as an artist. I've painted for years and still don't. When does that happen? I think sometimes, Nancy, we are waiting for someone else to identify us, to give us permission to do what we really love to do and to call yourself an artist. And the more I look, there's a little bit of this funny thing. None of us, I think, would think it's okay for someone who's been painting for a few days to pack up all their stuff and go and present themselves to a gallery and ask for representation. We know that would be the height of a big assumption to make. So, you know, there's a difference between saying, I'm creating art and I'm, you know, going to make a living as a professional artist. There's some different criterias there. But I think that we have this idea that we need to meet some kind of external standard. But really, if you're making art, if you're trying to get your ideas out and express them in some way, you're an artist. And I've been encouraging my junior high art class with these thoughts that, again, you are an artist if you are actively working on ways to express your ideas. And it doesn't have to be painting. It doesn't have to be even anything that's traditionally recognized. So I'm not sure how to help you make that transition to owning your identity as someone who makes art. But you are if you're painting, and it doesn't matter if your paintings are turning out, and it doesn't matter if you're winning competitions, and it doesn't matter if you've ever made $1 from your art. If you're involved in the act of creating something, you're a creator, you're an artist, you're working on getting your ideas out there, and that's where art comes from. And so just chew on that for a while, and I hope that it encourages you and helps you on your path. And yeah, we can think that it feels arrogant to claim this identity as an artist. And, you know, we're trying to be careful about how we do it. I get to be an artist. I don't have to, it's like a little gift to me. So I don't feel like I need to be arrogant about it because it's something that's for me and it gets to be treasured in my heart. And so when I don't know, that's kind of where I go with it. So, okay, I'm going to wrap it up. Everyone's leaving me. Many of you have to go to bed because it's late at night. I know just the further east we go, the later it is. So have a great night, everyone. A great day in Australia, Wayne, and I won't see you next week, but you will be hearing from me and seeing me soon. Do subscribe to my email newsletter. There is a link below the video for you to sign up. If you're not already on my email mailing list, then you'll be keeping up with everything that's happening. Joe, feel free to email me, and thank you for moderating today. As always, I've always appreciate having you here to help keep tabs on the chat. And I appreciate everyone else who's been here today too. Your encouragement, your positivity, and your thoughtful questions. They always make me think, and I shouldn't be so quick to try to answer them and stumble for words, because sometimes, sometimes you're very profound and I need to think about it for a while. So thank you. Have a great night, and we'll talk again soon, I promise. So bye.